3 spine-chilling true wilderness tales. Revealed horrors of cursed, sinister encounters. The whispers of whispering pines were liable to send chills down anyone's spine. Just beyond the suburban neighborhood known for its quaint charm, lay a forest where shadows danced under the trees and echoes of the past permeated the air. There, locals spoke in hushed tones of the wraiths of whispering pines, the spirits of the lost, cursed to roam the woods, claiming the souls of anyone brave enough to venture too deep. It all sounded like folklore until you found yourself alone in the dark. When Sarah packed her car with her 2 kids, Emma and Jake, she thought it'd be a healing experience. Camping had always been their thing, a break from the chaos of city life, a chance to bond over campfires and starlit adventures. But as the sun dipped behind towering trees, the air turned eerie. The campfire crackled, and nearby campers began spinning tales, each syllable thick with dread. "You do not want to wander too far," one man warned, his eyes glinting like a black hole. "Some have never returned." Even Jake, her sensitive 8-year-old, could feel the weight of their surroundings. Nightmares began before they even pitched their tent, dreams of shadowy figures stalking them, whispers curling around his small frame like icy tendrils. The next morning, Sarah noticed their gear malfunctioning, flashlights flickering wildly, gas stoves sputtering as if spirits of the woods were toying with them. But she brushed it off, focusing on the kids, trying to bring laughter back into their lives. After all, what could happen in the daylight? Yet the atmosphere grew palpable when shadows stretched longer as the sun vanished. The kids had wandered off, captivated by a fleeting, ghostly shape drifting into the trees. Panic seized Sarah's heart. "Come back!" she screamed, but it was too late. They dashed deeper, laughter fading into the haunting silence. Frantically, she called for help, only to be met with scornful dismissal from disinterested park rangers. "Kids have wild imaginations," one chuckled, waving her off. Anger boiled within her, but as the darkness closed in, the dismissal felt like shackles binding her. With dread bubbling in her chest, Sarah pressed into the forest, following the whispers that seeped from the trees. Each step bore the weight of caution and urgency. The ancient tales of betrayal she had dismissed suddenly felt real. The forest felt alive, a pulsating entity that consumed sound and light. A dilapidated cabin appeared unexpectedly, lurking among the twisted branches, a place that radiated dread. It seemed to breathe, pulsing with a sinister energy that made her skin crawl. She stood frozen before its door, an unbearable sense of dread clawing at her throat. As she peered inside, the whispers intensified, texts of her worst fears entwined with the forest's secrets. Shadows danced across the cabin's threshold, and she caught a glimpse of a familiar face within the darkness, a figure she once trusted. The truth began to crystallize. Her children's disappearance was not random. It was a confrontation with something unspeakable. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Taking a deep breath, she unlatched the door, her heart racing. The darkness beckoned her, promising secrets and danger. What lay behind that door? Would she find her children? Could she escape the fate of those snared by the wraiths? As shadows whispered her name, she stepped over the threshold, plunging into a darkness that felt alive and hungry, a darkness that held truths she might not be ready to face. The moment Sarah crossed the threshold, a cold wave washed over her. It felt like 1,000 icy fingers grazed her skin. The cabin's air was thick, suffocating. She squinted into the gloom, straining to see in the dark. Muffled whispers coiled around her like smoke, rising and falling in a symphony of despair and longing. Shadows writhed on the walls, morphing into shapes that twisted and contorted, almost as if they were alive. "Emma? Jake?" Sarah called, her voice trembling as it pierced the suffocating silence. There was no response, only the relentless, haunting whispers that surrounded her, seeping into her mind like poison. Fear drummed louder in her chest, each beat a painful reminder of the reasons she was here. To find her children, to confront the unknown. As she pressed deeper into the cabin, her foot nudged something small and metallic on the floor. She bent down, shaking hands trembling. A rusted pendant, shaped like a half-moon, lay jagged at her feet. Its surface shimmered even in the darkness, almost mesmerizing. A memory flickered. Her grandmother used to wear one just like it, a talisman against bad spirits. A shiver raced down her spine. Was it a sign? In the corner of the room, the shadows quivered, drawing Sarah's attention. A low, sorrowful moan filled the air, slicing through the whispers. Shadowy figures emerged, flickering like candle flames. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears. There, huddled together, were children. Small, pale faces peered out from the dark, their eyes hollow and fearful, mirroring her own growing dread. "Jake! Emma!" she screamed, bolting closer. But as she reached for them, they vanished into wisps of darkness. The cabin groaned around her, shifting as if in pain. She stumbled back, her breath hitching. The walls seemed to pulse, and Sarah realized with horror. The cabin was alive. The whispers grew stronger, their cruel edges slicing into her psyche. Memories crashed into her, her children laughing, their first steps, the feel of their small hands gripping hers. But all the while, an insistent shadow slithered closer. It was beckoning her. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice whispered, low and raspy, echoing like a crack in her mind. Sarah spun around, trying to locate the source. "They're not here for you." Her breath caught. She remembered too late the locals' warnings, the stories that had seemed so far-fetched. In a frenzied panic, she dashed back toward the door, but it slammed shut. A laugh, throaty, sinister, filled the space. The shadows gathered at the corners, their forms swelling and contracting until they almost resembled human silhouettes. "Join us," they wailed in unison, as anguish-laden echoes filled the air, tugging at her sanity. Sarah clawed at the door, desperation spilling over. Suddenly, it burst open. Light flooded the room, illuminating the figures of her children just outside. They stood frozen, faces twisted in terror. "Mom!" Emma cried, reaching for her. But as Sarah leaped forward, a pull yanked her back, as if the very darkness around her had teeth, sinking deep into her. Intense fear filled her as she felt the hold strengthen. "Don't look back!" Emma screamed, her voice piercing through the fog of terror. Could she leave her children behind? Were they truly free of the cabin's grasp? As she stood trembling in the doorway, the shadows lunged, shrieking with fury. In that moment of agonizing choice, darkness clawed into her flesh. Would she choose to stay in this realm of terror to save her children? Or would they all be snared by the wraiths of whispering pines? As Sarah prepared to make that fateful choice, the shadows collapsed around her, their anguished cries mixing with her own screams. A brilliant light flickered, illuminating the cabin once more as everything went dark. What awaited her on the other side? Would she find the strength to rescue her children, or had the curse of the wraiths sealed their fates for eternity? Sarah felt the pull shift, the darkness loosening its suffocating grip for a fleeting second. She gasped, tasting the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. But the relief was short-lived, evaporating like mist on a warm day. The cabin trembled, a low growl reverberated through the floor beneath her. A warning whispered in a tongue she couldn't understand. Her vision cleared momentarily and she spun around, searching for her children. The walls pulsed with an alien energy, a heartbeat syncing with hers, a maddening rhythm that threatened to drive her insane. "Emma! Jake!" she cried again, but only the echo returned, a cruel mimicry of her maternal desperation. The shadows lurched closer, invading her personal space, swirling like tempests around her. 100 faces flickered in the darkness, each one twisted, each one distorted by suffering. One figure stepped forward, a child with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes, its mouth stretching into a horrifying grin. "You can't leave," they never left, It hissed, and the room vibrated with the weight of the truth. Fury surged within her, igniting a flame of desperation. "I'm here to save them," she screamed, her voice barely rising above the eerie hum of the cabin. But the figure merely giggled, the sound wrapping around her like a cold serpentine embrace. There hours now the laughter echoed through her mind, pulling her down into an abyss of terror where memories of her children's laughter turned sour, twisted by despair. Her every instinct urged her to flee, yet her heart hammered in tandem, a paradox of loyalty and fear. Out of the corner of her eye, a gleam of light captured her attention, pulsating like a heartbeat, whispering promises of hope. She pressed forward, inching toward its source. But as she did, the shadows reacted violently, shrieking in fury. They crashed against her as if the very walls were alive, shoving her back. "Stay away," she shouted, flailing against their unseen grip. Yet with each shout, the darkness grew thicker, the whispers evolving into a cacophony of torment. The familiar sound of her children's voices curled around her. "Mom, help us. Don't leave." Emma's cry tore at her heart, wrenching it in a vice of despair. Sarah felt it, the blinding urge to turn back, to find them, to plunge into the pitch-black terror and pull them out of this nightmare. Fumbling her way through the chaos, her fingers brushed against the walls. They felt slick and warm, as if dragging her toward the ground. She drew in a shuddering breath. "Please, I won't abandon you." She flung herself toward the darkness, the pendant around her neck glowing softly, casting a flicker of hope against the oppressive weight of despair. And then, in the darkness, she saw them. Jake, a flicker of golden hair, Emma's eyes sparkling with something that felt like warmth. But they were shrouded in shadows, just out of reach. "Mom!" they wailed, and with that sound, the shadows recoiled, allowing just enough space for Sarah to close the gap. But as she lunged forward, the darkness surged back, a tidal wave of cold that dragged her down into a whirlpool. "You belong to us," it shrieked, the shadows melding into a monstrous form, an entity without shape or soul. Screams filled her ears, choking her resolve. With every ounce of strength, Sarah kicked against the tide of despair, reaching for her children. Their essence shimmered, beckoning her closer. She felt the warmth of their hands brushing her skin. Could she pull them back from the brink? Something deep inside her recognized the cost of failure. She would have to face whatever lurked in the middle of the shadows, the entity that claimed their souls. "I will fight," she screamed defiantly, determination igniting her soul like wildfire. As she launched herself into the chaos, the whispers crescendoed, and the room quaked as if bracing itself for what was to come. But the shadows rippled, as if they had a mind of their own, and just as she thought she had reached her children, an icy hand gripped her ankle, pulling her down. "What will you sacrifice?" it whispered, its voice thick and slithering, the challenge hanging heavy in the air as Sarah's grasp on her children began to slip. Would she risk everything to confront this horror, or would the wraiths claim them all? Now, in that ultimate moment of truth, Sarah teetered between salvation and eternal damnation. What sacrifice awaited her in the heart of the darkness? The grip tightened, a frigid tendril wrapping around Sarah's ankle as if it had teeth. Panic surged through her, igniting a fire of fury mingled with desperation. "Let go," she screamed, thrashing against the overwhelming darkness. Every instinct told her to recoil, to protect herself, but the truth of her children's peril anchored her like a stone. With a burst of adrenaline, she tore away from the icy hand, the shadows howling in frustration. They swirled violently, worthy opponents in a fight she had never trained for. Each pulse of the tainted light from her pendant fought back, illuminating grotesque visages that danced close enough to brush against her skin, leaving trails of terror in their wake. "Mom! Help!" the children cried once more, their voices growing fainter beneath the weight of the darkness. Fear clawed at her throat. She couldn't let that happen. She refused to be a prisoner too. But shadows had a language of their own. They shifted and writhed, taking shape behind the laughter of the lost souls, growing larger and more ominous. "Join us," 1,000 whispers beckoned, echoing like shattering glass. It was seductive, this promise of oblivion, and for a heartbeat, she nearly succumbed. Then, through the suffocating darkness, a memory flickered Jake's first steps, Emma's giggles stretching into the night like a song. A warmth surged in her chest, a beacon of hope. No, not today, she roared, summoning every ounce of defiance. Summoning all her strength, Sarah charged forward, pushing against the thick currents that sought to drown her. She broke free, stumbling forward into the light at the center of the shadows. And there they were. The shimmer of her children caught her breath, their faces twisted in agony, lost in the nightmare that surrounded them. "Mom!" they cried, reaching for her, hope mingling with despair. The light around them flickered dangerously, like a candle threatened by a gale. "Hold on. I'm coming," Sarah cried, lunging once more. But just as she felt the warmth of their hands, the shadows surged, a dark wave crashing against her. Dread wrapped around her heart. Sacrifice, the whisper taunted, and the walls of reality wavered, distorting as if she were seeing the very fabric of their souls tugged and torn. There was a price to be paid, an exchange that reeked of treachery. What would she trade? Memories? A part of herself? She hesitated, terror clenching her gut. "I can't lose them," she shouted, but uncertainty clawed at her resolve. The darkness hissed, slithering around her ankles, dragging her slowly toward despair's maw. In the pulse of fear, a thought struck her. A flicker of rebellion ignited. "I'll give you what you've taken," she yelled, surprising even herself. "Take my pain." The shadows stilled for a moment, intrigued. The air grew heavy and still, a breath held in silent anticipation. "What will you surrender?" they questioned, their voices cold and unyielding, vibrant with curiosity and malice. "Everything," she declared, a promise spilling from her lips. In that instant, an odd calm washed over her. She felt free, gripping the knowledge that she would do anything for her children, even if it meant facing a fate worse than death. The ground shuddered, the shadows swirling faster, encircling her in a tempest of anguish and malevolence. Jake and Emma's faces blurred, shifting from distress to confusion. "Mom, what are you doing?" With a breath that felt like a steel blade entering her chest, she stepped deeper into the abyss. Would this sacrifice herald their salvation, or her doom? Light flickered as shadows tore at her, and with every inch she surrendered, a howl erupted from the depths. In her heart, she knew there was no going back now. As she stepped into the unknown, the darkness pulsed, responding like a wild beast, and everything grew still for a heartbeat before the world exploded into chaos. What had she awakened? What cursed bargain was she forging in the shadow's depths? Would this darkness scream victory or relinquish her children? In that tense moment, the fate of their souls was sealed, but at what cost? The air thickened, heavy with the scent of decay and the electric charge of dread. The very darkness encircling Sarah hissed and writhed, thrumming against her skin like a live wire. With every heartbeat echoing in her ears, she felt the shadows breathing, anticipating her surrender, clawing to snatch away what little light remained. "Mom!" Jake's and Emma's cries split through the cacophony, their faces ghostly pale, their limbs thrashing against the spectral chains that restrained them. The shadows were feasting on their fear. Sarah lunged, arms extended, desperate to bridge the distance. But their sweet faces were assaulted by the swirling gloom, twisting into anguished masks as chords of laughter erupted from the darkness. Each laugh was a dagger that pierced her heart. "Embrace the pain," the voices sang with a malicious glee. "It will set you free." She recoiled, heart racing, trapped between ice and fire. Loss gripped her like a vice. The reality of her bargain slammed into her chest. She had chosen to sacrifice her pain. The fog of despair rolled in thick, wrapping around her throat like a serpent ready to strike. Where were the children? The shadows thickened, turning into a wall of living darkness, pulsating like a beating heart. In the middle, her children were still there, shadows of hope flickering in their wide, innocent eyes. "Mom, don't!" they gasped, their pleas penetrating her resolve, leaving her rattled and wavering. But then she remembered the warmth of their laughter, the weight of their hugs, the dreams she had for them. Was she truly willing to gamble it all? The weight of her choice settled heavily, an anchor threatening to drown her in hopelessness. In that restless moment, she felt a swell of anger rise from her core, a motheress rage ignited by the thought of her children being swallowed whole by the darkness. Here they were, trapped in a nightmare, while she faced these twisted entities who thought they could take everything from her. "I will not give in," Sarah bellowed into the void, her voice ringing out like a battle cry. The shadows hissed, recoiling as if stung. "Then pay the price," they responded, their voices a dark chorus reverberating through the air, tainted and filled with venom. "Suffer the depth of despair that you crave so badly." No, she would not fall into their trap. Sarah felt her pendant pulse, a remnant of the warmth still fighting against the chill. She focused on it, allowing its gentle glow to guide her heart. With a fierce determination, she reached deep into the essence of herself, the love she held for her children, the dreams she nurtured, the fierce will to protect. Drawing on that, she shouted, "You think this is despair? This is my strength." The shadows recoiled, their faces morphing into expressions of hatred and disbelief. The light surged stronger, splintering the darkness around her, illuminating grotesque faces contorting in fury. They screamed, a horrifying sound that shattered the air, though their anger only fueled her fire. "Let them go," she demanded, voice full of defiance. And in that moment, the shadows shifted, their grip faltering as if they sensed the intensity of her love. "We can break you," they sneered, but Sarah could see cracks forming in their icy exterior, the darkness beginning to shatter. The ground trembled beneath her feet, the world swirling into chaos again. But this time, she felt her strength growing. She pushed against the encroaching darkness, feeling the tendrils losing their grip. "Mom, you can do it," the children cried, hope blossoming in their voices. But as Sarah surged forward, the darkness convulsed, a final explosion of despair. "You will pay," was the last promise from the abyss, an ultimatum laced with malice. As it retaliated, dark tendrils reaching to pull her back into its cold embrace, desperate to drag her under once more. Would she shatter the darkness, or would it consume her entirely, leaving her children trapped forever? The fevered battle surged around her, and an insidious thought took root: what if the only way to save them was to embrace the very darkness she fought against? The world around Sarah erupted in a maelstrom of shadows and sound, as if the very air had turned hostile. It clawed at her, biting and whirling, but she held tight to the light within her. It was a beacon in a storm. Her heart raced, pulsing with fierce determination. "Mom!" Jake and Emma shrieked, the chains still binding them, their eyes wide with terror. Each scream felt like a dagger to her soul, feeding both her resolve and despair. The dark figures surrounding her twisted, contorting into grotesque shapes, and chittered in low, guttural tones. They slipped closer, their jagged edges glimmering with malice. "You think love is enough?" they taunted, the mockery drenching the air like poison. Taking a step forward, Sarah felt the heat of her anger welling up again, a raging inferno within her core. But there was something deeper, a flicker of doubt, whispering insidiously at the edges of her mind. "What if?" she questioned. "Stop," she shouted at herself, clenching her fists. She could not allow the darkness to worm its way into her thoughts. She had to focus. She took a deep breath, drawing in the strength of her memories, the first smiles, the stories at bedtime, the way Jake had gripped her hand when he learned to ride a bike. With every image, her pendant pulsed brighter, illuminating the shadows dancing with sinister glee. They shrieked, a cacophony of fury as they recoiled from her light. "Brightness is weakness. You will fail. Not today," she screamed, stepping forward into the dark. The world shuddered around her, the shadows retreating yet swirling in tandem, losing their cohesion as patches of light began to break through their ranks. It was working. She could feel it in her bones. With a renewed sense of urgency, she called out to her children, "Hold on. I'm coming, the shadows hissed, launching forward in a sudden wave. Sarah's heart dropped as dark tendrils snaked around her ankles, tightening with a vice-like grip. Pain shot through her as she stumbled, struggling to break free. Despair rushed to envelop her, whispering sweetly of surrender, but she fought against it, pushing with every ounce of her will. No, this is not the end, she bellowed, focusing all her strength on her love for Jake and Emma. But, with every ounce of courage, she felt a gnawing fear. Could they truly be saved? Or had she only made things worse? A flicker of darkness seeped into her heart, wrapping its cold fingers around her thoughts. As she thrashed against the darkness, a piece of her began to unravel. The chains holding Jake and Emma seemed to pulse with the shadow's energy, feeding off her growing desperation. In a moment of pure agony, Sarah felt her unwavering belief slip. Maybe they're better off, she thought, exhausted. A terrifying vulnerability took root as the tendrils pulled tighter, her inner strength collapsing under the weight of despair. No, she roared, shaking her head violently, refusing to crumble. The thrumming love she felt surged again, drawing forth a blinding light from her pendant. And then everything changed. The darkness screamed, manifesting into swirling shapes that lunged at her, desperate to extinguish the glow. In that moment, Sarah realized something. The only way to save them was not only through fighting but perhaps understanding the very darkness she had feared. Before she could contemplate it further, another surge of shadows rushed in, attempting to snatch her away, leaving the children screaming in helplessness behind her. "Mom!" they cried. And just like that, a sudden clarity struck her. "Embrace your fear," she yelled, choosing to confront the darkness head-on. Would that be her salvation or her doom? The shadows writhed around her, proliferating like a storm ready to break. As Sarah drew in the breath of determination, daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, their fate rested in her hands. But with every heartbeat, uncertainty clawed at her. Was embracing darkness a path to salvation, or the ultimate betrayal of everything she loved? The tendrils of darkness were deafening as they whipped around Sarah, drawing closer and closer. Each shadow was full of menace, swirling just out of reach like a predator toy. The air vibrated with ominous energy, and her pendant flickered as if it could sense the danger. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, willing the fear to dissipate, but the whispers only grew louder. "Join us," they beckoned, seductive in their lull. "You know you want to." She could feel the shadows pressing against her skin, cold and clammy. With every breath, Sarah's resolve wavered. The images of her children twisted into phantoms. Jake, eyes hollow, Emma, mouth stretched into an eerie grin. It made her stomach lurch. "Stop!" she screamed into the void, but the shadows only cackled, their laughter slithering through her ears like a sickening melody. They were feeding off her terror, and she knew she couldn't allow it. Sarah took a shaky breath and envisioned her children, not as twisted reflections but as they should be, laughing, vibrant, and full of life. This vision ignited warmth in her heart, a flame powerful enough to cut through the chill deep within. She thrust her arms forward, feeling the light from her pendant blossom out like the rays of a morning sun piercing through darkness. The shadows recoiled, their tortured faces squirming in anger and fear. "No, you cannot resist us," they shrieked, but she stood firm, eyes blazing. "Watch me." As she stepped further into the writhing void, the light grew brighter, illuminating her surroundings. For a moment, she could see beyond the walls of darkness. Wisps of memory floated by, trapped in the shadowy web. Echoes of laughter, the scent of her children's favorite cereal, their tiny hands entwined with hers. The shadows shrieked again, spinning faster. The air thickened, growing heavy with despair and anguish as they fought to drown her light. "You are unworthy," they hissed, barely making it above a whisper. But Sarah felt a new strength, one that came from understanding her fear rather than fleeing from it. Embracing the darkness did not mean succumbing to it. It meant confronting it, letting it guide her instead of imprisoning her. She remembered the advice she had once given her children during late-night storms: the more afraid you feel, the more courage you have to summon. "Fear isn't my enemy," she said softly, It's just a part of the struggle. Her pendant pulsed with energy, sending out waves of light eradicating the encroaching shadows. The dark figures staggered, their forms unraveling as Sarah's resolve swept through like a cleansing tide. She felt the warmth of hope shift within her, filling not just her heart but radiating through the air, reaching out to her children. And for a brief moment she was sure they felt it too. But doubt lingered in the corners of her mind, slick and whispering. The chains binding Jake and Emma were still there, thundering in time with the pulse of fear in her veins. "Mom!" They cried again, voices curling through the chaos. The shadows writhed violently at her feet, grasping at her with sharp fingers, desperate to pull her back down. "Hold on," she shouted, her voice rising above the tumult around her. "I'm coming. I'll find you." The light flickered again, feeling weaker. Panic squeezed her chest like a vice. What if I can't do this? The thought shot through like an ice-cold blade. But there was no turning back. She was done with retreating. With a guttural roar, she charged forward, cutting through the mass of shadows surrounding her. But as the darkness writhed closer, something flickered in the corner of her eye. A figure emerged towering and cloaked in black, its face obscured, and something deep in her gut warned her it wasn't just another shadow. "Sarah," it rasped, a voice like broken glass sliding across rock. Fear roared back to life, clawing at her throat. "Who are you?" she gasped, the light from her pendant flickering with uncertainty. "I am what you refused to see." A cold wave of terror crashed over her. What revelation awaited her now? And could she fight it? With the fate of her children hanging on the edge, the very shadows whispering her name, what would it take to overcome this final challenge? The figure loomed larger, its presence consuming everything around it with a density that felt almost tangible, like a weight pressing down upon her chest. "You cannot save them," it crooned, each word layered in a silky malice. "You were never meant to." Sarah gritted her teeth, pushing back the urge to shatter. She couldn't let this entity seep into her mind. It was a dark reflection of her fears. "You're wrong. I will save them." Her voice trembled, but she stood her ground, defying the looming shadow. The entity laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the void. "Your fear feeds the darkness, Sarah. You are weak, just like before." The statement struck her like a blow. Images flashed in her mind again, moments of neglect, hurtful words spat during fights over trivial things, times when she felt trapped by her own failures. "Enough!" she yelled, the light from her pendant flickering in rhythm with her rising anger. She forced the memories away, reminding herself that pain was part of life, but it didn't define her. If she wanted to reach Jake and Emma, she had to deflate the shadows of doubt. "You win." The figure recoiled slightly, as if stung. It cast a disapproving gaze, its obscured face hovering just beyond the reach of her light. "Futile," it hissed. "You have lost so much already. What makes you think they'll return to you?" There was a sharp edge to its voice, almost a taunt. Sarah felt her heart drop at the truth buried in those words. Each doubt felt like a hammer against her resolve. "You lie," she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. "I have not lost them. I'm here to bring them back." An unfamiliar sense of determination began to swell within her, battling against the despair trying to take root in her soul. The entity thrust its hand forward, elongating into a mass of shadowy tendrils that reached hungrily toward her. She felt the coldness wrapping around her wrist like iron chains, squeezing and biting. "Feel your fear, Sarah. Embrace it. It is all that remains." In that horrifying moment, the shadows fell away, revealing vivid snapshots of her children, ones that twisted her heart. Images of Jake getting lost in the woods, tears streaming down his face. Emma crying, her tiny body shaking when Sarah had to leave for work. Memories that gripped her with guilt. "Mommy!" Their faint voices cried, echoing through the cavern of shadows. "Don't give in," she shouted against the curling tendrils. The light from her pendant surged fiercely, pulsating against the suffocating darkness. They were here. They were waiting. With every ounce of strength, she ripped her wrist free, feeling a rush of warmth wash over her. I will not let you take me, she roared, swinging her arms wide, sending arcs of light dancing into the shadows. I am their mother, the shadows hissed, recoiling fiercely, and yet, the figure's laughter grew, haunting and chilling. Very well, try to be their savior. But the price for such courage can be devastating. A blinding pulse of energy shot out from her pendant, the light exploding outward and scattering the shadows, creating pockets of illumination amidst the encroaching dark. Sarah stepped forward, running toward the sound of her children's pleas, but just as she reached it, a crippling cold swept through the void. What have you done? The figure shrieked, its anger like a tempest. Before she could reply, a sudden tremor shook the ground, and she staggered, losing her balance. Vision blurring, a horrific rumble echoed through the darkness, sending her sprawling backward. In the chaos, she caught a glimpse of something, a door, barely visible but glowing faintly just ahead. The shadows twisted violently, writhing to block her path, but instinct guided her legs. Hold on, she screamed, pushing herself up. But would she reach that door in time? With shadows clawing at her ankles, would she find her children before it was too late? Everything hung in the balance as she raced toward the glimmering light. Would it lead her to salvation or doom? Sarah barreled forward, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm as the shadows melted and twisted behind her. The door pulsed with a warm, inviting glow, promising safety that felt too good to be true. Every step shrieked with urgency. She ducked under a grotesque, snake-like tendril that lashed at her with dark intent. Ice-cold dread shot up her spine, but the image of Jake and Emma steered her forward. Just a little farther. She urged, more to herself than anything else. The shadows writhed violently, but she fought her way through the invisible walls closing in around her. Not this time. Her voice tore through the air, tremulous yet resolute. The door grew closer, radiating hope, but with each step, the ominous presence of the entity coiled around her like smoke, penetrating her thoughts. They're lost, Sarah. It sneered, its voice weaving through her mind. You won't find them. You will only find despair. No, she screamed. The image of her children flooded her mind, their laughter, the comfort of their tiny hands in hers. The memories sparked a fire deep within her, one she refused to extinguish. I will save them. Suddenly, the ground below her buckled again, sending her tumbling. She instinctively rolled, pushing herself back up, lungs burning. The door shimmered as if taunting her, mocking the distance that kept her just out of reach. Come to me, Sarah. It seemed to beckon or lose them forever. The entity's malice swelled like an angry tide, each shadowy tendril now darting toward her, seeking to ensnare her in a web of despair. The haunting laughter echoed ominously, mixing with her children's cries. Mommy! No! The panic clawed at her throat. She lunged for the door, every ounce of hope fueling her momentum. Light poured from the pendant, illuminating her path, battling back the darkness. A tendril snatched her ankle, another wrapped around her wrist, pulling her back into the depths of despair. Give in, Sarah. The darkness welcomes you, let me go. She twisted and pulled, desperation coursing through her veins like fire. The pendant pulsed, brightening with each scream, weakening the entity's hold. If only for a moment, she felt the grip loosen. The door shimmered brightly, its frame dancing with ethereal energy. It was close enough now. She could almost see the outlines of her children beyond the threshold. Jake! Emma! She cried, their names a lifeline tugging at the fraying edges of her sanity. I'm coming. The shadows surged around her, thrashing in a furious attack, their whispers coiling into her ear. They will not remember you. They will not want you. You are insignificant. Memories flashed vividly, Jake's mischievous grin, Emma's joyful laughter, each one a reminder of countless cherished moments. No, you're lying. She felt a surge of defiance wash over her, wrapping her heart like a shield. I won't let you take this from me. With one great heave, she tore herself free, launching forward straight through the doorway. Light enveloped her as she crossed the threshold, feeling warmth flood her body, the entrancing tones of her children searching for her. But just as quickly as the warmth enveloped her, it faded into a biting chill. Shadows coiled around the doorframe like serpents, whispering promises of despair. Welcome back to reality. Cold fingers grazed her cheek. She felt a breath on her neck. The darkness wasn't gone. Wide-eyed, she turned, heart thundering. But the children were nowhere to be found. All she saw were silvery tendrils pulling back into the void. Where are you? She shouted, panic rising in her chest. A disquieting echo circled around her. You chose to enter, Sarah, the figure hissed, now looming at the threshold, its laughter more sinister than ever. But do you truly understand the cost? The door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into an abyss. Desperation clawed at her throat, drowning her in uncertainty. Would she find them again, or had she made a devastating mistake? She was trapped, but the thought of giving up sent icy dread spiraling through her. An ominous shadow lingered at the edge of her vision, a promise of horrors yet to come. Time wouldn't wait, and neither would the darkness. What lay ahead was a descent into terror, and she had just ignited a battle far beyond her imagination. Would she be strong enough to face it? The shadows churned violently around Sarah, a maelstrom of despair and anguish ready to swallow her whole. Her heart thundered, pulsing out a desperate rhythm as she stood in the darkness, feeling more alone than ever. Where were Jake and Emma? Mom! Their voices echoed in the void, but their physical forms were nowhere to be found. Fear gripped her chest, squeezing tighter with each haunting call. I won't abandon you, she cried into the dark, anger flaring, refusing to let fear dictate her next move. Futile, the entity chuckled, its voice washing over her like cold water. It loomed larger, and Sarah could almost see its twisted face, a grotesque parody of her nightmares. You have entered a realm of despair. No one escapes here. Watch me, she spat back, her resolve solidifying like iron. The darkness shimmered with creeping shadows, curling around her feet as she prepared to face the impending storm. She couldn't allow herself to be lost here. Thoughts of her children, laughter echoing in her mind, became a lifeline. With each step, the shadows hissed in protest, striking out at her, but she pressed forward, heart ablaze. The pendant around her neck pulsed, reacting to her determination, glowing brighter with every brave thought of Jake and Emma. She focused on the warmth they brought, their laughter, the sound of their tiny footsteps, warmth of their hugs. I promise I will find you, Sarah shouted defiantly, the voice in her head urging her to retreat silenced by her intensity. With newfound strength, she charged into the mass of tendrils swirling around her. You will not keep me from them. The shadows attempted to snatch at her, but her light weakened their grasp, illuminating twisted faces that recoiled with fury. Your light is weak. You will become one of us, they screeched, a cacophony of malice. No, I am their mother, she cried, launching forward into a tremor that rattled the air. Just beyond the dark, she could feel something familiar stirring a presence, an essence she thought she had lost. Jake, Emma, the shadows twisted, forming into grotesque shapes that flickered and vanished. Lost, they taunted, deep laughter echoing. But amidst the disintegration of hope, something unexpected happened. The darkness shuddered, as if it were being pushed back. And without thinking, she squeezed her eyes shut, embracing the feelings of hurt and guilt that squeezed her heart. I have lost, but I will not lose you, she cried out, recalling sacrifices, moments of regret that tugged at her heartstrings. She acknowledged their weight, recognizing her own human flaws. With that thought, light lit across her entire being, erupting from her chest, flooding the depths of shadow that had closed in. You don't own me, she screamed, the pendulum of her emotions swinging wildly, fear, love, anger all coalescing into pure, unadulterated courage. You will never take them. The shadows diaphanously quaked, faltering as pieces of light struck through the tightening walls of darkness. Fighting against the grip of despair, she felt the shadows thinning around her, a path opening up ahead. Could it really be? Could she reach hold on? She screamed, sensing the presence of her children not far ahead. I'm coming. In that heartbeat, Sarah dashed forward. She broke through layers of darkness, finally seeing the silhouettes of her children, chained yet shimmering. They turned their heads, eyes wide, jaws parting in silent cries. Mom! They gasped in unison, their faith in her pouring forth. With every ounce of strength, Sarah launched herself forward, shattering the shadows that dared to hold her back. She forced herself through the last veil of darkness, feeling the chilling shadows writhe around her, hungry for her resolve. But this time she was not afraid. With an unwavering scream of love, the entity screeched as if wounded. You think you can't save them? It roared, dark tendrils thrashing against her arms. You think you triumph? I know I can, she declared, her light piercing through the darkness, illuminating the space into brilliance. She dove beneath the shadows, ducking and weaving, focusing on her children, their beautiful faces, smiles that lit up her heart. Jake, Emma, Mom, their voices tugged at her, safe and loving. Right there, she felt the chains starting to loosen. Suddenly, she felt fingers, tiny ones, wrapping around her own. Jake, pulling her in, dragging her from the abyss. Emma joined in, and the warmth surged. Shadows howled in disbelief, laughing frantically, but they were growing dimmer. Don't you see? Sarah exclaimed, raising the pendant, which glowed like a beacon. Love conquers all. With an exhilarating surge, the shadows shrank away as bursts of pure light radiated around them, threatening to consume the shadows once and for all. In a whirlwind of light and love, they stood together, Sarah cradling both children in an embrace, each heartbeat a promise popping against the weight of shadows. With one last howl, the entity twisted, its form shuddering as the last shred of darkness unraveled. You may have escaped today, its voice echoed, trailing off, but we will meet again. The cabin around them dissolved, shadows collapsing into oblivion, the darkness retreating, like a storm clearing after the rain. Is it over? Emma asked, voice trembling but bright. Sarah held her tightly, relief washing over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Yes, my loves, we're free. They stepped out from the remnants of doom, embracing the warmth of the reality they had fought to save, the sun warming their skin, the forest alive around them like a gentle reminder of another day. With the woods recovering, Sarah threaded her fingers through her children's hands, taking a breath that filled her anew. They would never forget, but they had won. They were together. We'll always have each other, she whispered, and together they walked away from Whispering Pines, carrying the light within that nobody could extinguish. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories, filled with heart-pounding suspense and unforgettable endings. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help more people discover these tales. Flood the comments section with your reactions, theories about this ending, and what you think happens next. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Show your support for the channel now.